Okay, so these problems are starting on page 14 of the packet, but you don't have to print out the packet or anything. Just do them on a separate sheet of paper as we're doing them here in the video. So there's going to be one thing different for this task compared to the last task. We will not necessarily be leveling off at y equals 0 anymore. If we look at this picture here, based on the dotted line, we're leveling off at y equals -1. So our basic setup is now going to be y equals a times b to the x, but we have a -1 on the end. Before, we were leveling off at 0, so it's like we had a +0 on the end. So that's going to be the one new thing. Now, if you forget that thing added on at the end, you're probably going to get some crazy numbers. So if you're getting crazy numbers on the homework, it probably means you forgot to put whatever needs to be added or subtracted on the end. So that's the one main new thing, and we'll see there's one difference when we're solving, just one tiny step. So we'll take our x's and y values. So we'll have 5 equals a times b to the 0 minus 1. And then we'll have 11 equals a times b to the first minus 1. So this is the one difference when we're solving. We need to first get rid of the thing we're adding or subtracting. So we're going to add 1 to both sides. So this one's going to give us 6 equals a times b to the 0. And this one's going to give us 12 times 12 equals a times b to the first. So now it's very similar to what we did before. So bigger equation goes on top, so we'll do 12 over 6 equals ab to the first over ab to the 0. Divide the left side, we get 2. The a's wipe out. When we subtract our exponents, we get b to the first, which is the same as just saying b. Now, we can plug in for b in either spot. We can either plug in something from this row or something from that row. It's going to be easier if you plug it from that second row of things. So I'm going to do the 6 equals a times b to the 0. So we're going to have 6 equals a times 2 to the 0. Anything to the 0 is just 1, and 1 times a is a, so a is just 6. So when we write out our equation, okay, this is something that a lot of people forget. We've got our 6 times 2 to the x, but you have to make sure you put that value back on the end. So we have -1 on the end. Just like the ones from the previous task, put this in your graphs page now, do a Control T, and check to make sure those 2 points are in your equation. Okay, you should be doing those checks on the homework because if it's not checking out, then you know something's wrong and you need to fix it. So when you submit your homework, you should know whether they're all correct or not because you should have done the check. All right, here's our next one. Notice this one, our dotted line there, the asymptote is leveling off at y equals 2. So our basic setup in this case is going to be y equals a times b to the x with a +2 on the end. Now we still may see ones where it levels off at the x-axis, so those would just have nothing on the end, but a lot of the ones we'll see today and in the homework will be leveling off elsewhere. Just notice the negative for that -1 blends in a little bit there. So we have 8 equals a times b to the -1 with the +2 on the end. And then we've got 5 equals a times b to the 0 with the +2 on the end. First thing we need to do is get rid of that value that's added or subtracted on the end. So we'll have to subtract 2 from both sides. So this will give us 6 equals a times b to the -1. And 3 equals a times b to the 0. And now we're right back to where we were with the previous task. Bigger exponent is the 0, so that goes on top. So we'll have 3 over 6 equals ab to the 0 over ab to the -1. And again, we do this so that when we divide, we'll end up with a positive exponent. On the left, we'll get a half when we divide those. A's wipe out. Be careful whenever you have a negative in the bottom one. So we've got 0 minus a -1. So those end up adding to give us 1, and b to the first is the same as saying b. So b is just a half. I'm going to sub back into this one here. That's probably the easiest. 3 equals a times 1/2 to the 0. Anything to the 0 is 1. 1 times a is a. So 3 is just our a. When we go to write our answer, make sure we tack that number back on the end. So we'll have 3 1/2 in parentheses raised to the x. And we need to put that plus 2 on the end. Again, on your homework, you should be checking these. Put it in a graphs page, do a control T, make sure those 2 points are in the table. Next one, we are leveling off at -1. So our general setup is going to be a times b to the x with a -1 at the end. So we'll fill in our y value, -2 equals a times b to the 0 with a -1 on the end. And our other point will have -5 equals a times b to the second with a -1 on the end. Again, if you forget that -1, you're going to get crazy numbers when you divide, that when you take the square root, they don't come out reasonable. So that would be a clue that you forgot to put your thing on the end. First thing we should do is get rid of that number that's tacked on the end. So we'll add 1 over on both sides. So this is going to give us -1 equals a times b to the 0. This will give us -4 equals ab squared. Now we're just to where were last task. The squared is the bigger exponent, so we'll put that stuff on top. -4 over -1 equals ab to the second over ab to the 0. The left divides to give us 4. On the right, the a's wipe out. 2 minus 0 is just 2, so we get b squared. Take the square root of both sides. Normally we need the plus minus, but b cannot be negative. Keep that in mind. If you're getting a negative value for b, you did something wrong. And I'm going to sub back into the one here that had the 0. So -1 equals a times 2 to the 0. Anything to the 0 is 1. 1 times a is a. So a is just -1. So we'll write out our answer. And when we write that out, make sure to tack your number back on the end. So we'll have the -1 on the end. All right, so we're going to look at 3 more, and these 3 additional ones are going to be a little harder because we won't have the y-intercept, so it's just not as easy. So here we're leveling off at 2. So I'm going to skip to plugging right into the equation now. So we're going to have 4 equals a times b to the first, and we should have a plus 2 on the end because we're leveling off at 2. And we should have 3 equals a times b to the second with a plus 2 on the end as well. We'll get rid of those plus 2's first. So subtract the 2 from both sides. This will give us 2 equals a times b to the first. This will give us 1 equals a times b squared. The squared is the bigger exponent, so that stuff will go on top. So we'll have 1 over 2 equals ab squared over ab to the first. 1 divided by 2 is just a half. The a's wipe out. And when we subtract our exponents, we get b to the first, which is the same as just saying b. So therefore, we've got our b value there. I'm going to sub back into the b to the first one to get our a. So we'll have 2 equals a times 1/2 to the first. Anything to the first is just itself, so this is a times a half. We're going to divide both sides by a half. Okay, when we put this in the calculator, make sure you do a fraction button 2 on top, then do another fraction button on bottom for the half. So we'll get 4 equals A. So when we write out our equation, we'll have y equals 4. Make sure we're putting that b value in parentheses, raised to the x, and we've got to tack our value on the end, the plus 2. All right, next one, if we look, we're leveling off at 4. That wants to be the first thing you're looking for with these. So we're going to jump right to subbing in. We'll have 16 equals a times b to the third, with that plus 4 on the end. And we're going to have 8 equals a times b to the second, with the plus 4 on the end. First thing we should do, subtract that 4 from each side. That'll give us 12 equals a times b cubed, and 4 equals a times b squared. B cubed is the bigger exponent, so that stuff will go on top. So we'll have 12 over 4 equals ab cubed over ab squared. Divide the left side, we get 3. Divide on the right, we just get b. So b is 3. And I'm going to sub back into the squared one there. So we'll have 4 equals a times 3 squared. 3 squared is just 9. So when we divide the 9 over, we get 4/9 for a. I usually get a lot of people that say, could that possibly be right? And yeah, 4/9 is a nice fraction. It's not anything crazy. So we'll just have y equals 4/9 times 3 to the x. And don't forget to tack your plus 4 on the end. All right, last one for the video. 1, 2, 3, -4 is where we're leveling off for this one. So this is going to be 4 equals a times b to the 6th minus 4. And then we'll have -2 equals a times b to the 4th minus 4. We'll add our 4 over on each of them. So we get 8 equals a times b to the 6th. And we'll have 2 equals a times b to the 4th. Our next thought is which is the bigger exponent, which is the 6 in this case. So the 8's going to go over the 2. And the ab to the 6th is going over the ab to the 4th. Divide the left, we get 4. The a's divide out. We'll get b squared. We'll take the square root. Normally we need a plus minus, but b can't be negative, so we just take the positive. And then I'm going to sub into the 4th one. So we'll have 2 equals a times 2 to the 4th. 2 to the 4th is saying 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So we get a times 16. And if we divide the 16 over, 2 over 16 just reduces to 1/8. So we'll get 1/8 times 2 raised to the x, and don't forget to tack the minus 4 on the end. So on the homework, as you're doing these, you need to show all the work that we're doing here, and make sure to put it in your graphs page, do a Control T, and check your answer to make sure it has those 2 points. If it does, then you can be confident that your answer is correct.